Councilmember Wilson.
Here.
Councilmember Tiscarino.
Here.
Councilmember Ogerchuk.
I'm present.
Mayor Pro Tem Thorpe.
Here.
Mayor Wright.
We were in closed session, and I will turn it over to our city attorney to report out.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council. The City Council convened this evening in two closed sessions. The first closed session was a performance evaluation of the city manager. An evaluation was given, no other reportable action was taken. The second item was a conference with legal counsel regarding existing litigation. This is the matter of the decision of the Agricultural Commissioner of Contra Costa County in an appeal that was filed to the Department of Pesticide Regulation. The City Council authorized reportable action, specifically the filing of an appeal in Superior Court of the decision of the Department of Pesticide Regulation in this matter. The motion was made by Councilmember Ogerchuk, seconded by Councilmember Tiscarino. The vote was 2 in favor. Councilmembers Ogerchuk and Tiscarino voted in favor. 1 vote against, that was Councilmember Thorpe, and 1 abstention, that was Councilmember Wilson.
Okay, if I can ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll have Councilwoman Monica Wilson lead us off. Next, we have a proclamation for recognizing this 2017 Delta Stand Down. Do we have a representative from? No representative. Okay. Is there a motion from council?
So moved.
A motion by Councilmember Wilson, seconded by Councilmember Ogerchuk. Cast your votes. The motion is approved. Do I have to read this? I'll read the proclamation. Whereas the Delta Veterans Group is a veteran service nonprofit that assists men and women who have served our nation with housing, employment, health, and education services. And whereas the Delta Veterans Group was founded in Contra Costa County in 2012 by Army veteran Gerald Jr. Wilson, Delta Veterans Group has grown to provide services to surrounding Northern California areas, including Alameda, Monterey, Napa, San Joaquin, San Francisco, Solano counties. And whereas the Delta Veterans Group, in partnership with various nonprofit and county organizations, held Stand Down on the Delta on August 11th through the 14th, 2017, for homeless and at-risk veterans. And whereas stand down is a term used in times of war in which exhausted combat units come off the battlefield to rest and recover in place of safety. And whereas, according to the U.S. Department of Army Veterans, the first stand down was organized in 1988 by a group of Vietnam veterans in San Diego. And whereas stand down on the Delta is a 4-day encampment for homeless and at-risk veterans to come together, receive support from their communities while being provided with court and legal services, Department of Motor Vehicle Services, addiction and mental health counseling, chaplain services, clothing, food, shelter, hygiene services, wellness, medical, dental, employment, and merit of other community services, and treating veteran participants with respect and dignity, as well as honoring our female veterans and family veterans. Whereas the Delta Veterans Group was proud to bring the first homeless and at-risk of becoming homeless veterans stand down on the Delta of its kind to Contra Costa County, September 9th through the 11th, 2015. Now, therefore, I, Sean Wright, Mayor of the City of Antioch, do hereby proclaim and recognize August 11th through the 14th, 2017 as Stand Down on the Delta 2017 and encourage residents to recognize the positive impacts of this event and assist veterans and to express gratitude to those who have served and continue to serve. This August 22nd, 2017. Announcements of civic and community events. Shannon Skinner.
Good evening, Council. My name is Shan Skinner. I am the Marketing Manager for Summersville Town Center, and I just wanted to update you on some of our events. Recently, we had the Back to School Stuff the Best Supply giveaway with Clarissa Wilson. This was a great event. It was a wonderful turnout. We had over 1,000 people that were helped with this event. We have also teamed up with Hope from Excalibur Business Solutions for our upcoming Family Fun Fair this Saturday, August 26th, 10 to 5 p.m. We are also inside the mall from 12:30 to 3:30, Saturday, August 26th, same day. That way you can hit both events. We have the Folsom Talent Connection hosting a model and talent search for teen and kids. Again, that's this Saturday, August 26th, 10 to 5, and then 12:30 to 3:30. We are also working on some great upcoming events for trick-or-treating at the mall on Halloween. And we have a wonderful senior mall walk event for Alzheimer's. We're going to do that November 3rd, 9 to 11 a.m. I will have more to come in the upcoming weeks on these events, and our holidays, Black Friday and Christmas, are not that far away. Also, one last thing. We are excited to be working with Volta car charging. So we have 2 car charging stations in front of the mall. They will be up and running within the next couple weeks. Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Nancy Kaiser.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the council. Nancy Kaiser, Parks and Recreation Director. It's wonderful to follow Shannon because we have so much happening in Antioch this fall season. The Recreation Department is hosting some free and low-cost family activities, beginning with Monday, September 4th. That's our last call for summer fun, and that is on Labor Day. It's the final day that our water park is open for general admission. So again, half price all day. Bring your families and friends and spend the day celebrating the end of summer. We also have on Friday night, September 15th, our final Friday night campfire. This is a fun evening. We partner with East Bay Regional Park District. They bring a naturalist out to the amphitheater at the Antioch Community Center from 6 to 8. We do a full campfire there at the amphitheater, and we wrap it up with s'mores. There are a number of other exciting events happening this fall, including the Delta Blues Festival, rock painting for Halloween. So as we shift from summer to fall, just stay in touch with our websites, our community center, and other activities and organizations here in Antioch. And I have cute little postcards to share with you so that you can just pass them out as you're walking through town. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Nicholas Oliver.
Good evening, Council, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. My name is Nicholas Olivier, and I have been a shop owner in the Rivertown Business District since 2015, and have had the privilege of seeing it grow from an abandoned ghost town into a quaint shopping destination. But despite growth, there have been undeniable struggles that we merchants urgently need your help with to keep the momentum alive and to encourage more business to come to downtown. In the last year, Rivertown has experienced an unacceptable number of property crimes. The following businesses and owners have been victimized by theft, broken glass, vandalism, and other crimes: the Lynn House Gallery, the Rivertown Treasure Chest, Zendy's Boutique, Fantastic, Jim Lanter State Farm, Rivertown Suites, both East County veteran thrift shops, Linda Johnson Photography Studio, Elite Dance and Event Center, the Southern Cafe, the Coin Shop on 2nd Street, the Rose Time of Day Dress Shop, Rodney's Building for Sale at the 500 block of 2nd Street, Rick's on 2nd, Plates, Urban Jumble, and more. Now, this trend cannot continue, or else the future of downtown as a destination will be jeopardized. The public perception that the downtown is unsafe directly threatens growth and stability of businesses, and we need your help to overcome this negative perception. We all need to take responsibility for what we can do to curb crime and enhance public safety in the downtown area. Efforts to better safety on your behalf have not gone unnoticed, and we do appreciate the proactive efforts of this council to increase public safety. Police response times have become quicker. Public Works has demonstrated a commitment to improvements such as the LED lighting upgrade at the end of G Street. And evening patrols, though they have been limited, and we'd like to see more of them, have been spotted on G Street and 2nd Street during after hours. As merchants, we invest in costly security systems and surveillance systems. We are also working with the Crime Prevention Commission of Antioch to implement Business Watch to better communicate with our neighbors to deter crime. Increasing the frequency of reporting crime and code violations is another active way that we are working to help reduce crime and to keep the city informed. But unfortunately, we can't do it alone. I implore the city to prioritize public safety in the Rivertown area with the increase of patrols specifically between 9 p.m. and 6 a.m. when the majority of these crimes are committed. In order to see the scale continue to tip in favor of a thriving Rivertown business district, it is imperative that public safety improve to deter crime and to prevent the demise of one of Antioch's best assets, vibrant business in the Rivertown district, not fear and not apathy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I just want to remind the audience that we're doing announcement of civic and community events, and there is a time for public comment for items not related to the agenda later on.
Oh, did I fill out my form incorrectly?
Yes, you did. But I forgive you. I forgive
I'm
you.
so sorry.
It's okay. And I'm assuming, Jim, you're is it? It's an event, okay. Well, come on down.
Well, Nick thought it was an event also, so. And it has been once in a while. Let's see, I have these to pass out to everybody. Good evening, everybody, council and city staff. I'm here on behalf of the Rivertown Merchants and Celebrate Antioch, and hopefully I can get this read in 3 minutes. I have a little problem with my vision, so I'll get through it as quick as I can. We're here tonight to, first of all, tell you about an event that we're going to hold in September and ask for your support. Joy Motz and I met with Nancy Kaiser last week and went over our objectives for the event. And with her help and guidance, we got all of our application fees or all of our applications into her this week. We do know, and we did have discussion with Nancy, that we have to be a little bit better on getting some of the paperwork in earlier. And we promised to work on that. You know, we're learning. We really are. Our event is scheduled for September 23rd. It's going to be called the Rivertown First Annual Brew Crawl and Brew, Crawl, and Barbecue Cook-Off. You have some flyers in front of you that depict that. The Rivertown Merchants Group that is co-sponsoring with Celebrate Antioch actually had our first meeting back in October of 2015. And our objective was, number one, to try to put together a group that would help build retail business in the downtown by co-op advertising and trying to hold events. Since then, we've had 2 very successful wine walks. We had a rain-interrupted, very, very successful cruise in October of last year. Let's see. We've had 2 Halloween events that have been trick-or-treat events for kids and costume contests. Before that, Debbie Blazier had a very successful block party on G Street to celebrate her first-year anniversary downtown. And then we've also had a Christmas craft fair last year in conjunction with the Holiday Delights Parade that was very successful. We're very proud of what we've done so far. We're working to try to do bigger and better events. The co-sponsoring with Celebrate Antioch is a big benefit for us. They've done a great job in the events that they've done, Holiday Delights, bringing back the 4th of July celebrations. They're organized. They're helping us financially, which is really nice. And they're just good people to have plugged in, and we're very, very happy to be working with them as a group. What would we like from you for support? First of all, we'd like to ask you to help with the permit process moving swiftly. We think we've done a good job in getting everything filled out that Nancy asked us to. We have filed our Confire permit. We have filed our health permits, the one-day health permit for the event. Fill out an application and come and cook with us, or volunteer to be a judge on that day. I'll talk to each one of you individually about that. Thank you.
I'll judge the brew. Stacy Melson, Antioch Police Department.
Good evening. My name is Stacy Malsom, and I'm the dispatch manager for the Antioch Police Department. I'm here and excited to announce that effective immediately, our dispatch center is going to be able to accept text to 911. Not only are we one of the first agencies in California, but we are almost the first one in Contra Costa that's able to accept this method of communication through our dispatch center. So it's a pretty simple thing. What you would do is just on any phone that you could text, you text 911, and then you'd have to include your address and the nature of your emergency. It's tricky because it doesn't provide the address like you would think it does on a cell phone, so that's going to be one thing we'll have to work on, but you have the ability to send the text, which would be important because if there's times that you couldn't call, you now have the ability to send a text. So it's only for emergencies, but it'd be used very similar to 911 calls. It can be used for fire and medical calls, but we're trying not to encourage that because it's not as quick, and sometimes the fire dispatchers can give you advice prior to medical arrival. So it's not something we want you to do, but you can if you weren't able to speak and you needed to send a text. It works that way as well. So it's a fairly new advancement in technology, and not all cell phone carriers are on board at this time. If you were to send a text and your carrier didn't get it, you would get a return message saying, please place a voice call. There's a couple other tricks about it. It's only able to work if you text in English. You couldn't send any photos or emojis or anything like that. It has to be plain text, and you have to have good service on your cell phone. The other limits are similar to when we started accepting cell phone calls. You have to be in the city of Antioch, and you can't be in CHP's jurisdiction. You also couldn't be texting as you were driving out of the city because it's something that Antioch's taken on, similar to what we did with cell phone calls, so it's very specific to you being in Antioch. You don't have to be an Antioch citizen, you just have to be in the city to send us the text. We're really excited because I think it gives a lot of people a new way to get a hold of us if they need to in emergencies. It's also good for hearing impaired, and if you had some kind of like a prowler where you couldn't speak, you could be in a closet texting, and it's a safety issue that may come and play that way. So what we're gonna say about it is call if you can, text if you can't, and I think it'll be a great I think it'll be a great benefit to the members of our community, and it's something I'm really excited to announce that we're doing first. Thank you for allowing me, and if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Betty Smith, Antioch Rivertown Jamboree.
I'm going to pass these to you so that you can give that to them, please. Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and staff. It is my pleasure to be here to invite you to our Rivertown Jamboree. I know we are ahead of the game, but I want you to put it on your calendar. This event is sponsored by Supervisor Glover and also the Keller Canyon Funds. We're going to be jamming on the Delta, October the 7th and the 8th. We will have live entertainment. We're all excited about that. We'll have, I'm guessing, about 5 to 6 bands out there this year. This will be a first for all the bands. So we're kind of like bringing the music back with the activity. We'll have the fishing pond for the kids and children's zone as well. We'll have the food. Hopefully we'll have food trucks. We're working on that. But if not, we'll have food vendors, arts and crafters. We're also coming back to us is the Delta Thundercats, and they are the ones that put the activities on the water. So you'll see all kinds of activities on the water with the boats and, you know, the different things up in the air and the all exciting things that happens on water. So I'm here just to plead to you to put this on your calendar and also for the community also to join us on that day. I'm pleading because we need a count, okay? And as our community grow, we know that we can bring our people out to the water. We've been told for years that people don't even know we have water here, you know? And so we're here to help to beautify Antioch and bring them to the water. And it's a family-oriented moment. So I'm here to invite you and excited that we're doing this one more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Holly, was this for public comment or for? Oh, so come on down. No, we're not on public comment, but.
Civic.
You check civic. Oh, okay. All righty. So you are not up. Sit down. Bear with me. I have no idea what I'm doing. So announcements of board and commission openings.
There are vacancies on the Board of Administrative Appeals, Economic Development Commission, and Planning Commission. Applications are available in the back of council chambers, at the city clerk and deputy city clerk's counters, and at City Hall and on the city's website.
Thank you. Now we go to public comments. Holly, come on down.
Good evening, council members. I haven't seen you all in a while. I was out of town at the last council meeting, and I really wanted to sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for supporting the police chief's recommendation for a shelter manager. It's been a long, painful process for many of us, and I think this will be wonderful for the community. And it didn't eliminate anybody's positions or hurt anyone. It's actually a very positive thing for the community. And so thank you very much. And I also want to thank each and every council member, no matter how you voted, for your patience and listening and true genuineness and concern for everyone in the community that that wanted to talk to you about the shelter. So really, really appreciate that, no matter what has happened in the past. And with that, I also want to thank the police chief for making that recommendation. And I see that he also has gotten himself up to speed quite quickly on animal sheltering, which I'm sure he wasn't expecting. So we did want to acknowledge that. We appreciate that Police Chief Brooks has done that, and that he is recommending the shelter manager, and also for his work with the partnership with Tony LaRusso's Animal Rescue Foundation. This really is an incredible group that has been in the community for many, many years. And I also, of course, want to thank ARF. They really didn't have to step in to help Antioch at all. There is nothing they are getting out of it other than helping the community and the animals. And so I did want to publicly thank ARF for their work in Antioch and thank all of you for welcoming them in with a true partnership. This really can only help the community and the animals. And we are very happy to see that going on. So thank you.
Thank you. Tammy Larson.
Hello. My name is Tammy Larson from Almost There Travel on 2nd Street. I'm yet another Rivertown merchant come to talk about some issues that are going downtown. Fortunately for my business, I haven't had too much done to my business. No broken windows, no graffiti from the front. But my issue now lies with last week, my husband going up to the rooftop, and there's homeless people living on the roof. So we didn't call the police, but he did leave a note for them to leave within 72 hours. And they're gone, but they're still in the back, even though we have signs everywhere posted. So I just kind of want to make you aware that it's not just on the sidewalks in the back anymore, the railroads. They're actually camping on the rooftops now. So something the police need to be aware of. And just like Nick said, we're merchants are doing our part to keep our livelihoods downtown and our businesses safe. And again, we appreciate the work that you guys are doing. We're definitely getting together with the crime prevention. So that's it. I just want to say thank you for helping us. We hope it continues, and we'll do our part if you help us do your part too. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Jeffrey Klinger. And he'll be followed by Richard Panfili.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. At your last meeting, you voted and approved a shelter manager position. I wanted to take the opportunity tonight to thank you for doing that. I think that's an extremely important move to get animal services moving forward and hopefully bring in outside talent that will have us leaving in the rearview mirror the issues that got us here in the first place. All those well-documented issues of mismanagement, about poor practices, and even in some cases what some experts have called animal abuse. So I want to thank you for that. As we saw at the last meeting, not everyone agrees that it was a good idea. Change is always scary. I get that, okay? And what you're going for is change. And I want to thank you for looking forward and improving that position. I think the direction, working with ARF and the direction the chief is taking it, I'm very confident that the course that's been charted for the last 2 weeks is going to get Antioch the shelter it deserves. And I want to thank you for you helping to make that happen.
Thank you. Richard Panfili, and followed by John Goodson.
You got it right, thanks. Good evening. This is going to be a little bit off the chart from what everybody else has been talking about, but there's a couple ordinances in the city of Antioch that for some reason we cannot get no help trying to figure out how to take care of this problem. I have neighbors that live next door to me that have 2 adult German Shepherds and a puppy German Shepherd. They're living in horrid conditions. We've had officers come out, they've crawled up, looked over our fence, and both officers have said that no, this is unacceptable and we're going to take it to the next level. We've went to the dog pound, they told us it's a police issue. We've had the police come out, these dogs are living in filth, they're not fed. The stench from their feces and urine is so bad that I can't even open up my front door of my house. I have more, and I'm trying not to make a joke of it, but I have more flies flying around my house than at the dump. It is just, it's gotten to the point now where our quality of life it's unbearable. I can't go outside and barbecue during the summer because it stinks so bad. I have somebody come over, The dogs are knocking down my fence because they're so aggressive. And this is kind of like my last alternative. I've done the dog pound. I've called Contra Costa County Animal Services. I've called the police department, and they all say, well, we're going to do something about it. And it just dies. It doesn't get to the next level. These dogs don't, they might be very good dogs, but no animal should be living in these kind of horrid conditions. And so this is kind of like my last plea to see if I can get something done for these dogs. I've talked to the owner, and he just goes, they're dogs. That's just the way they live. So this is my last plea. Hopefully you guys can maybe talk to somebody. I just noticed a couple nights, a couple people talking about animal services now are getting a little better. Hopefully somebody can do something to get these dogs and our quality of life better. Because, nobody here would like to open up their front door in the morning to go to work and it's smelling, no disrespect to the dog pound, but it smells like a dog pound. It's that badly gross. If you don't believe me it's this bad, anybody is more than welcome after this meeting to come to my house at 2109 Banyan. You can see it for yourself. It's horrendous conditions. Thank you for listening to me. Thanks.
Thank you. John Goodson, followed by Angela the Victorian. Do you forgive me?
Good evening. We are John and Lauren Goodson. We're at 204 G Street at the Vintage Dress Shop, The Rose Time of Day, and we've come to present our Come Around Rivertown shirts. Huzzah! These are designs that we had made. Can you hold that one? These are designs that we had made with a double meaning. One is come around Rivertown and shop with us, and the other is, of course, the revitalization of Rivertown coming around. That's our very own G Street that we have on there, a photograph I took, and we had it sketched, and we're pretty excited about it. So we have men's and women's styles, and these are available at the Rose Time of Day for $20. Thank you. Come around.
Thank you. Angela the Victorian.
You almost got it, Victoria, but it's my
Yes. It's all your fault.
Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to come and speak before you tonight. I really appreciate it. Oh, I wrote this morning, but I'm not going to use it because the question I want to ask is there an ordinance in Antioch for vagrancy? I looked through everything and I could not find anything. So maybe the police chief or somebody can tell me that is it illegal to be homeless or vagrant in Antioch? Is there actually an ordinance? Does anybody know? No. So that's what I'm wondering. Criminalizing the homeless is a terrible thing, but what is the recourse when there's so many homeless people? So I'm wondering if Antioch would ever adopt anything so drastic as to cite the homeless. I feel terrible. I see it all the time. It's awful. And I'd like to do something positive about it, but where does it start? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, we are not allowed to respond to public comment. So, but our city manager, I'm sure, took copious notes and will follow up. So, next speaker, and I have two speaker forms for this individual, Tina Rouse.
Hi, my name is Tina Chavez Rouse. I'm the wife, or was the wife of Frederick Rouse. I wanted to give a reading tonight in regards to the bereavement thing that I had tried to post online for everyone. So excuse me for having to use my phone for a sec because I had to get this sent to me from the mortuary. So,
Tina, can you bring your microphone just a tad bit down?
I'm
Thank
sorry.
You.
my voice is really hoarse. I've just had so much to do this past month, so please understand and bear with me. Fred, loving husband of Tina Rouse, was born on April 22nd, 1960, in San Antonio, Texas. And he passed away peacefully in Antioch Sunday evening, July 23rd, 2017, at 57 years of age. He was too young. Fred and Tina met San Jose at Santa Teresa High School and later married in Cupid's Chapel, Las Vegas, Nevada, on February 21st, 1986. Fred loved Tina with all his heart and would do anything for her. They shared their life together, as well as pet names for each other and their favorite songs: Eric Clapton's Wonderful Tonight, Chicago, You're the Inspiration, and You Are My Sunshine. He was a caring, loving, and giving protector. Fred had a wonderful sense of humor. He loved his family and friends deeply and appreciated them greatly. Fred's biggest passion was music, and he played with many bands over the years. He began playing music at the age of 8 years old and was proficient in over a dozen instruments. He loved everything about music, including all types of audio components and vinyl records, collecting close to over 1,000 over the years. The Beatles were one of his favorite groups. Fred also had a heart for philanthropy and helped out in many ways in the city of Antioch community, including volunteering for Habitat for Humanity, educating elementary students about banking and money, and teaching foster children a program for guitar through his program Guitars Not Guns. He was supposed to also start in September next month. He also ran for city council in Antioch in 2016 and served for over 10 years on the Board of Administrative Appeals. Fred was predeceased by his parents, Roy M. Rouse of New York and Jean Rouse of Boston, and his brother, Roy Rouse II. He leaves behind his sister, Colleen. He leaves behind his beloved wife, Tina, of 31 years. Colleen, his sister, and Dave, brother-in-law, niece, Christy, 3 nieces, nephews, and so forth, and 3 great-nephews. We have many. And his aunt and uncle in New York, and 4 cousins. And the family members, many beloved family members on my side, and to wonderful friends and people in the community. So mainly I wanted to read that and tell everyone that I have the signature memory book in the back and a picture of Fred and a poster board with just some pictures through the years. If everyone would kindly sign the book, I would appreciate it for memory reasons. And I just, for now, want to thank you for your time. And Lamar, I'd like to thank you for attending the funeral on the burial date, which he's at Oakview Harvest Park, I believe it is, over off 18th Street. I still have to get the stone, but everything else is in place. So those of you who wish to speak to me after tonight's meeting, feel free and drop by and sign the book. I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you all for your time. One last thing is I wanted to mention Ron Burnell. My husband in the past had helped him as well, just giving him direction, because my husband, when he was exec senior director at a software company, he managed from $10 million, and the exec VP pushed him up to over $50 million. He managed as a budget per year. So he tried to sometimes give tips and things to Ron Burnell to give you advice of maybe how to more efficiently put out reports. There was a new radio station that was coming on board recently near the harbor. He helped with that. Guitars Not Guns. Of course, Board of Administrative Appeals, I heard you say earlier. There's an opening, and I know why. And much philanthropy that we could do throughout the community. So that's all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for sharing, Tina. We
Sure.
appreciate you. And just to remind the public and the community, we did, at the last council meeting, Tina couldn't be here, but we did open and close the meeting in Fred Rouse's honor. He was a member of our Board of Administrative Appeals, and he did serve there for 10 years. And so we certainly appreciate all of his service to the community. And he was our opponent for City Council, so he will certainly have a special place in all of our hearts and the impact that he left in Antioch. And so thank you for coming tonight, Tina. We certainly appreciate you being strong enough to come down here and share your words with the community.
That was the second part of my wanting to speak, but I don't know if there's other speakers, so I was waiting for the second portion.
You would be the last speaker for that.
Oh, my, okay. Oh, boy.
So this is having to do with the police department?
Oh, yeah.
Of a matter not on the agenda?
Yep.
Okay.
I just want people to be aware. That evening, sadly, when Fred peacefully passed away in his sleep, on that Sunday evening, I had found him in bed sleeping. At least I thought he was. He did pass peacefully in his sleep, and he did look like he was sleeping, and I tried to wake him up, and unfortunately, that didn't happen. So at least it was peacefully in his sleep. When the paramedics showed up banging on my door and the police officers, I was taken out of the master bedroom and led to my family room. Fred's background, as well as mine directly, have had other background that most people don't entertain in their lives, and that has to do with the government. So we know a lot of confidentiality, things that have to do reconnaissance, things to save the world, and various clearances that Fred would have been equal to or above seniority in clearances to our previous Chief Cantando. So he would be at like a level E13 or some level as a commander. In any case, because I know those things, and I know about profiling, and I know about connections, which is actually your handler, and I know about what's called a go bag, things like that, and many people aren't aware of some of these things. But once the police came in, instead of them talking to the community and knowing how involved Fred was and myself behind the scenes, they questioned me for over 45 minutes at the house as if they thought I had maybe done something wrong, kind of like CSI or 48 Hours or one of those. And I knew, and a half hour into it, that's when I started talking government lingo and different acronyms, etc. And they finally backed off. But they were accusing me as if I had done something to my husband. And they found out by testing him that he had only passed maybe in the past hour. That's why he was still warm to touch. So I just want to complain about them, how they didn't take the time to really understand a situation and to go after me and have 4 police officers, 1 in front of me, 2 to my side, and 1 behind me at my couch. And they just kept belittling me and asking question after question, and they wouldn't stop. And then finally, to get them to back off, I had to start basically talking another language that they would understand. And then they went, whoa, okay, we know. So I just wanted to mention that about the police department, that they should try to be more compassionate and try to find out all the details before they do accusatory things. So that was just my comment I wanted to mention to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other public comments? Nope, okay. Committee reports. Councilwoman Wilson.
Yes, although none of my meetings met, the ad hoc committee for Sycamore supported a community block party in Sycamore. We had lots of resources about the city of Antioch had a table. Chief Brooks was out there to talk to many of the attendees. They had books, school supplies, groceries, a lot of services for the members of that community. And it was apparently the second year that this event has happened in that area, and it was a great success. So thank you, Chief Brooks, for being there. Thank you, Nancy Kaiser, for getting us set up. And thank you to our city manager and council members and the mayor that were able to make the event. So that's my committee report.
Councilwoman Ogercho. I'm sorry, Councilman.
No, I think you already knew that I had no committees to report, so I understand the bypass.
None of my committees met, but I do want to share a good email, so if you'll give me a little latitude. It's regarding the disc golf that's finally in over at the Pruitt Park, and it's Bob Lyles is one of the people that went and put the disc course together. And he said that he was working on the course, and two different groups were playing on the course at that time that he was working on it. One guy has now gone back repeatedly and played it 5 times. He plays in a lot of other courses and tells people about this course now. Another gentleman was driving by and called his brother and told him about the course. So for those of you that don't know that we now have a disc course over at Pruitt Park, we do have one. It's a lot of fun, and I think now is the challenge time for Councilmember Tiscarino, because he said he was going to go out there and start playing it once it's been done. So I understand it's a great course. It needs a little bit more work, a little bit more love, but the people that put it together have been going out there on a regular basis and working on it. So go out there and enjoy it.
Mayor Pro Tem Thorpe. I was just going to add, just like regular golf, it needs a lot of practice, so I need a lot of practice before I get out there.
None of my committees have met, so I have nothing to report. Oh, Mayor's comments. The only thing I could say, and it's in the same light of, service. So in the last, few months, we've had a second Navy vessel who has collided, and unfortunately, lives have been lost. So I think this last one out on the coast of Japan, we lost 6 or 7 individuals, and we're missing 10 still. So I just wanted us to keep that in mind as we go on about our lives and we engage in this democratic process, and how we take too often for granted that the individuals who are serving out there abroad are risking their lives even when they're not directly involved in any conflict, that the work that they're doing is extremely dangerous, as we saw recently. So keep those individuals in your hearts and minds and in your prayers. Our members of our military, that they return home safe. And I say that having served 8 years in the Navy, so it certainly was something that rattled me, because it's always hard to lose shipmates, even if I've never met them. But please keep them in your hearts and prayers as you go on about your day. So from there we go on to our consent calendar, and I believe there was a member of the public who wanted to pull item I. Any other items that need to be pulled? Seeing none, do I have a motion? Motion by Councilmember Ogerchuk, seconded by Councilmember Tiscarino. Cast your votes, please. Motion passes. Item I. Oh, there's already a thing. If I can ask the police chief to come on down here, please.
Actually, I'll sit up here.
Yes, sir. Yes, there's some comments. Chief, would you like to go through the comments first, or do you want to give an overview of I?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. I can go either way. So my presentation regarding the grand jury response is merely that in June of this year, the grand jury of Contra Costa County submitted a report regarding Antioch Animal Services and its relationship in part with Contra Costa County Animal Services. In response to that report, the city is required to provide a response to its findings and recommendations. And tonight we submitted a proposal regarding our response to those findings and recommendations, and I will entertain any questions and clarify anything for you and the public.
Any questions from council? No questions. The only question I had was on recommendation 11. And that was the council should consider directing the shelter to collaborate with all accredited rescue groups to maximize rescues and adoptions. And I believe your summation or response to that was basically it's an unreasonable request.
No, I don't believe so. If that is what it says, it's an error. So let me just look. It says no, that the recommendation has been implemented.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about number 12. Oh, number 12. Okay. My mistake. And I only caught that only because at a February meeting, we specifically talked about this, and I was interested in seeing more of a formal process develop. But I'm interested in hearing what your concerns may be, or what does unreasonable request mean?
Well, it's just terminology that's a part of the grand jury response and how we're supposed to respond. So my opinion of this is there are a number of people in our community who are involved in animal welfare in one way or another, who are passionate about what they do and how they feel about the way animals are treated. However, I would offer that none of them are truly experts in shelter operations or management or shelter medicine. And I think what I would be looking at in the future is, one, the animal shelter manager that the council approved last week is someone who can provide regular updates to council regarding the operations and successes and things that are going on within the shelter. But I would also offer that we have relationships with experts in the field of shelter operations and medicine. We have a world-renowned UC Davis Corrit Shelter Medicine program right in our backyard. We have Maddie's Fund, we have East Bay SPCA, and we have ARF, just to name a few. These are people that we could actually call in who are truly experts in shelter operations if the council wanted to get someone to come in and offer their opinion as to whether or not the shelter operations are improving. These are people who are truly experts in the field who would be able to offer an unbiased opinion, and I think that would be something more that would be beneficial to the city.
Right. No, I appreciate that. And I was so I was under the impression we were kind of already doing that with ARF.
We are. So we have right now we have a partnership with ARF through the MOU. It's currently scheduled to go 12 months, so it could possibly be ending later on this year.
So why wouldn't that be written as a response to number 12? Because I like what you just outlined, and it would seem that we're already headed in that direction, or we're already there. Why wouldn't we respond?
Because that's completely different. So number 12 is a recommendation that we consider authorizing a selection of independent community-based animal advisory group.
So
ARF
that
is
not an independent.
No, they are not a community advisory group. They're actually a nonprofit organization. So the way I read this and the way we responded to it was, I believe they were asking for us to gather a group of community members to come in and offer advice to go through the shelter and see if it's being run. And the way they word it is to routinely visit the shelter and monitor welfare and shelter conditions.
No. Okay.
So it's basically asking, the way we read it, for a community group to come in and police whether or not the animal shelter is continuing on with the progress that we're currently making.
Okay. So I will open it up to public comment, and we will start with Karen Copps.
Good evening, Vice Mayor Thorpe and council members and staff. I'm Karen Copps, President of HARP, Homeless Animals Response Program. Thank you for pulling the response to the grand jury from the consent calendar. And I agree that ARF has recommended and the staff has implemented many improvements. And thank you again, as Holly and Jeff did before they did great. It was great that they commented the way they did, and I am totally in agreement with them. And thank you again, Council, for the decision to hire an experienced shelter manager. And I understand that the improvements are works in progress. I would like to point out a couple of areas that still need attention. And if I might, I would go to the recommendation number 12 that we just discussed. When in 2008, the Citygate report and other reports from experts have always advised a board or a commission to look into animal welfare in the community. And my thought on this is not a policing, so to speak, look at the shelter management, but input from the community, from people who are stakeholders in the community. For instance, a couple of years ago, the council voted a feral cat ban, a feeding ban. It took 2 years for animal advocates to fight this, and a huge amount of city time, staff time, council meetings that were really contentious. In the end, after 2 years, we came up with an agreement that we would have a managed colony in Rivertown. If there had been an advisory committee prior to that, there's no guarantee that the chief would have agreed to that or that the council would have agreed to that. But in the meantime, the community could have given input prior to the feeding ban. That's the kind of input that I would consider to be very positive. The other recommendation, number 8, I found only 18 dogs and cats on Shelter Me today. I didn't see any animals on petfinder.com, although they used to be accessible. I don't know why they aren't now. It'd be helpful to have another avenue to see animals that have been found and brought into the shelter, especially because there are limited hours in the shelter schedule. Some people who have lost animals can't get to the shelter in time. So I have other recommendations, but thank you for your time.
Thank you. Dr. Jeffrey Klinger.
Good evening again. Thank you for pulling this off the consent calendar. Replying to a grand jury report is serious business. And to be sure, there are lots of improvements that can be documented in the shelter by replying to the grand jury report. So it gets it out there. That's going to be a public document. It gets it out there that there are going to be progress to be made. We are making progress in a lot of areas. There's a couple areas that caught my attention that seem to be inconsistent, that if someone looked at that, they might say, well, that doesn't quite make sense. Recommendations 3 and 4 circle around using volunteers. The grand jury recognized the important role volunteers play in the animal shelter care. Every shelter needs volunteers to work. We know the shelter is still understaffed. We know budget constraints. Permanent staff is not coming, so we need plenty of volunteers. The grand jury found 40 volunteers in the roles, but only 10 to 12 routinely show up. That alone suggests there's opportunity for improvement. Recommendation 3 suggests that we're satisfied using volunteers as a rescue coordinator, but then in recommendation 4, it says, well, if we had a staff coordinator, we could use our volunteers more effectively. Well, which is it? That's kind of contradictory. If someone looks at that, it looks like, well, maybe we don't have a good handle on how we're managing volunteers. Certainly, the status quo of less than a dozen or so regular volunteers is not sufficient for a shelter of this size, which is ultimately the point of what the grand jury is saying. I would like to see us re-examine the volunteer issue, say, here's how we're going to go after that. Yes, it will require training, but we can go out and look for help for that. So right now it could be confusing. Volunteers are important. I think the report should reflect that. The other item is number 11, the rescue outreach. The response says that this recommendation has been implemented. Not No. The rescue summits were excellent starting points. I went to one of the rescue summits. Great discussions, excellent starting point. But it is not implemented yet. We're still waiting for the rescue summit agreement to be issued. That sets the standard by which all of the rescue groups will be treated equally. I've already heard reports that there's already some inconsistencies in how some rescue groups are being treated. That's the product of that summit, put it into that. So that really needs to be, I think, reworded to say that it's a work in progress, which it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim Sheriff? Oh, you want me to read it? Just keep in mind, I used to be an English teacher, so if I see... No, I'm just kidding. Dear council members, I would like for the grand jury response to reflect a changing of attitude towards volunteers, which the shelter desperately needs. From comments on social media and private conversations, I know that the poor conditions that exist inside the shelter before ARF arrived was a huge deterrent to people volunteering, even though they wanted to. Add to that the difficulty finding information about volunteering. There is nothing on the AAS website, a difficult application process, and applications that were never responded to created an atmosphere that volunteers were not welcome. Surely this is not the case. People will see the city's reply to the grand jury, and I would like for it to reflect a shelter needing and welcoming volunteers. Thank you. Next is Peter Wilson, followed by Holly.
Good evening, council, staff, and Antioch. My name is Peter Wilson. I've lived in the county since 2003. I retired in 2009 as the dean of the Cal State East Bay Concord campus. I have a vested interest in this area. I continued to volunteer my time. I believe in giving back. I'm a Federal Glover's representative on the Library Commission, very involved with Rotary in Concord and in service, and involved in animal rescue, particularly in East County, where there's an urgent need, as you're all aware. In 2012, 2013, I served on the civil grand jury, so I'm familiar with how it operates. And I'm not sure that everybody in the room is, so let me just say that when a complaint is filed or a member of the grand jury brings up an area for investigation within the jury, it requires consensus on the jury to go forward with the investigation. It's not just a one-person or two-person decision, nor is it a simple majority. When a report is completed and the jury reviews it, it requires, again, consensus to issue the report. It is not something that is a majority vote. It is for a jury to produce a report, particularly the quality of the report that came out about the animal shelter, requires a great deal of thought and substantial investigation. So it's an important step. I am concerned about the grand jury's report and the city's response to it in two ways. In several areas, for instance, in the finding number 6, which speaks to the written policies and procedures regarding animal care that the jury wanted to see the shelter put in place. The city disagreed with that and said their cooperation with ARF has resulted in the implementation of best practices and they're creating of written protocols, which I assume, therefore, written protocols are available for public record and are available for review, as would be the best practices. I haven't seen any of those, but I would like to see that. There's also a lot of information in the report, particularly on recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 4, where the city's response says this requires further analysis. We've been going at this for some time. This is not a new issue. And it does seem to me that the city ought to be in a position to do more than say this requires further analysis. And I hope the staff will put its mind to doing that. Frankly, what it seems to me that we're experiencing right now is an effort to kick the can down a road a bit and hope that things will work out, because a new director will get grants and will create funding opportunities. I hope that happens. I'm not sure it will.
but it's something you should be concerned about.
Thank you. Holly?
Hello again. First, I just want to say about an animal advisory committee. If we have the right shelter manager, if the culture shifts, then perhaps it wouldn't be needed. Maybe a temporary one is needed. And it could be community involvement. It doesn't always have to be experts. I mean, police are not shelter managers, but yet they're overseeing the shelter. So, you know, we can all work together as a community if they find a committee's needed. And again, I do believe if we get the right shelter manager, then I think a lot of that will be resolved, but we have to wait a while for that. I would like to see more of a plan maybe for the volunteers. You know, I think from what I heard about the last council meeting, I think it demonstrated the culture that has partly been happening at the shelter, that people would behave in such a way. So perhaps with new volunteers, new programs, a new positive outlook going forward, which is what we really all do want. We want to be here to be partners with the city, with police running the shelter, with the shelter manager, and certainly we are with ARF. And I do trust ARF. I'm very happy about their partnership with the police chief. And I give him big kudos for working with them. I know he's in a tough position as well. You know, and it's difficult because I know police does have to be more of a closed culture, but the shelter should not be. And my own experience recently, there were some difficulties when myself and Julie went in to pull animals. We weren't able to pull as many animals, so there still is some work needed, you know, with rescues. We're totally willing to make that work. We want to make that work, but we need some give on the side of the shelter as well, and with the chief, and we really would love to see that maybe reflected in the grand jury response, that we don't need some other staff position in order to get more volunteers involved and to have more of an open culture. You know, I mean, if you look right now in our country, there is so much divisiveness, and it just drives me crazy. It really hurts me to the core. And when I come here and experience that, it just makes you go, okay, in Antioch, we have an opportunity here to all gather around this purpose of our shelter. And, you know, I really see that's possible for everybody, for all the volunteers, no matter where they stand, for all the rescues. And so that's really what I sincerely hope for, and I hope the chief is listening because he's not looking up. Thank you.
He's taking copious notes on everything. All right, so I guess this matter is now before council. Are there any questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Chief, would you like to respond to him?
I will do my best. So bear with me. I heard a lot of stuff, and I was taking notes, Holly. I promise you. Dr. Klingler, I agree with much with what you said. I will say in response to recommendation number 11 with the rescue groups, I was at both of those shelter summits. There was great discussion there. It was imperative that we at the shelter heard from the rescue groups what was important to them, what they were looking for. It allowed us to communicate our needs with them as well. And yes, we are coming up with a with a rescue agreement, and those are in the final stages. And so while we technically implemented the change by going to the rescue groups, I will agree with Dr. Klingler that we still do have one piece left, and that is the rescue agreement, which we're in the final stages, putting the final touches on right now. And so depending upon how the council wants to word it, we can change to in progress to be implemented, or we can leave it as such, but this is going to be up to the council. Which brings me to the gentleman who had served on the civil grand jury. And one of the things that he had talked about was the thoroughness of investigations and the amount of time, obviously, that it takes to be thorough in investigations. And so he spoke of recommendation number 6 in particular, I believe.
It's actually 5.
Okay, he said that he did say 6. Okay, it is number 5 that talked about the policies and procedures. And when the grand jury came through, those were not implemented yet, but during the course of the investigation, prior to their final draft, they were implemented, and that's why there's a discrepancy and why we disagreed with it. Because he served on the grand jury, I'm sure he's also aware of the fact that really we need to respond in one of four ways. When we respond to grand jury reports, there's only four responses that they are looking for. It's either that the recommendation has been implemented, the recommendation has not yet been implemented but will be in the future, that it requires further analysis, or that it's not warranted. Those are the only four options that we have to choose from. And so when we say in our response that it requires further analysis, it's because that's what we have to say if we don't have a firm answer on it. And let's take the first, he said 1 through 4. Number 1 talks about finding sustainable funding for all of the changes recommended by ARF. At this point, I don't believe the city is in a position to say that we can find all of the funding necessary to make all of the recommendations by ARF. So I can't respond that we're going to do it, and I can't respond that we're not going to do it, and I'm not going to respond saying that we're partially there. I have to say it requires further analysis, or the council is going to say that it requires further analysis, because these are things that are going to be determined later on, and we have to figure out whether or not the funding is available for it. Number 2 requires additional staff. Additional staff requires additional money. So again, we have that answer that it's going to require further analysis to find out whether or not we're going to have the funds available to implement that change. The hiring of a rescue volunteer coordinator, again, would require additional staff and or funding, something that is going to require further analysis on behalf of the council. I will say in regards to that particular item, I have been working with ARF, and I've actually been speaking to them with it for some time, and have secured short-term one-time funding for a rescue/volunteer/foster coordinator. So there is money available, one-time short-term funding through ARF, through the generosity of Maddie's fund, to fund a position, and it could be either a full-time position or a part-time position. But there's still some details that need to be worked out. It is one-time money, very similar to the arrangement that was made for the animal shelter manager. And so this is something that I will bring to the council at a later date, and council will have to take that into consideration whether we want to go that route and take advantage of that offer. Let me go through my notes. I apologize. The community, or the Rivertown Cat agreement that was talked about earlier, that was actually never implemented. And the reason, in part, that it was never implemented was because not all the parties who got together could agree on what that Rivertown agreement would look like. And at times they did not work well together. And we've seen that, again, some people are very passionate about their animals, and there are differing opinions and philosophies on how these things should be handled. And so sometimes we don't come to a successful resolution, and that's just something to give consideration when thinking about the community-based advisory group. And checking with some of the other shelters in the area, the county shelter does not have a community advisory group. Hayward does not have one, and Oakland had one back in 2014, or it was disbanded in 2014. So these are other shelters in the area that do not have a similar thing that is being asked for. In regards to volunteers, we currently have 55 volunteers on the books, and I will agree that not all of them are regular volunteers in our shelter. But I don't think at this point our problem is the number of volunteers. It's that the volunteers that we have are underutilized and undertrained. And right now our staff is working with ARF to create job classifications and training for our volunteers, as well as a structured schedule. So we're going to train them in what to do. They're going to be trained in a particular assignment, and then we're going to create schedules so that we could better utilize the volunteers that we have. Another reason that it was noted that it, I'm sorry, the terminology, that it requires further analysis. So we're actually looking with the resources that we have now, trying to find out whether or not we can train the volunteers that are underutilized at this point and undertrained, and give them the training that they need to handle more of the responsibilities at the shelter. There was a question in regards to Pet Harbor, not Pet Finder, Pet Harbor. Right now, all of our animals are photographed on intake. One of the recommendations asked that we put photographs on the animal shelter website, and we said that that's not reasonable because our website is not a central repository for people to go and look for photos. Pet Harbor is a website that most people go to look for these animals. And right now, we are photographing all animals. There is a slight delay in getting those photographs actually entered into the system because our ACAs, our animal care attendants, can take the photo, but they don't have a computer in the kennel area to upload those photos, and so those photos have to be uploaded by an ACO later on by a computer that's in the office. But we have already ordered another computer for our kennel area, and we are working with IS to create that connection so that in the future, our ACAs, upon intake, will be able to take the photos and they will be able to upload them almost immediately during the process. And so that's something that we are currently working on, and that's noted in the grand jury response as well. And I think, let me check the rest of my notes. The last thing, just to comment on one thing about the closed culture with the police department. Actually, the police department does try and operate in transparency whenever possible. Our animal shelter will obviously do the same. And many of these recommendations, when we say that we're going to require further analysis, I think the animal shelter manager, as many of the people have already discussed, is going to be a central key to moving the shelter forward and implementing in one way or another many of the recommendations that we're currently looking at right now. So I offer that as well.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Councilwoman Wilson.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, everybody, for coming out, because we're all really passionate about the animals and the animal shelter. So I have a couple of questions. So you referred to a rescue agreement, but you also kind of talked about setting up kind of a job description for the volunteers. And I know we've talked about this in the past about setting up a process for onboarding our volunteers, letting them know if they're coming to the animal shelter, the volunteer, okay, so these are some of the guidelines that are set in place, and these are some of the rules, because it seemed like in the past that wasn't in place. So I'm assuming that's covered in the rescue agreement, or is that completely separate from what I'm talking about?
That's completely separate. So rescues are not volunteers. Rescues are typically nonprofit organizations who come in and rescue animals, and they may take them, maybe animals that aren't necessarily ready for adoption. They could place the harder to place animals. They take them. Some of them actually work with feral cats. Some of them work with animals that have certain conditions that may not make them necessarily adoptable to the general public. Our rescue partners are a huge resource for us and take a significant amount of animals from our shelter, and we could not survive without them. With that said, volunteers are people who come into the shelter and perform tasks. And so the onboarding process that you're talking about is exactly what I had mentioned that we had recognized was a shortcoming on our part, and that now we're going to start creating job descriptions, and that onboarding process will include training them in how to perform certain tasks, and then requiring our volunteers to sign up for assigned shifts to make sure that these tasks are taken care of on a regular basis, not just, right now where a group of volunteers could show up one day and then we could have no volunteers show up the next. This will allow us to space them out and to more adequately cover the needs of the shelter.
Okay, and I'm glad to hear that we're having this onboarding process happening, because it seems like there was some confusion. Some volunteers were coming and there was really no rules or guidelines set in place, so things were happening and somebody would maybe do something they didn't realize they weren't supposed to be doing and getting in trouble. So I'm happy to hear about this and looking forward to hearing more about this whole process in the future. Thank you.
Councilwoman Ogurchuk.
Thank you. Just a couple of notes. Now, since we're talking about the volunteers, do they have to go through a background check or anything? So can just 10 people just say, I want to be a volunteer in the animal shelter, and you just take the 10 people, or is there any process for that?
There is a minimal background check, yes.
So you just, I mean, so it does take some time once you get these volunteers. If
Well,
they
it does
say they
take
want-
some time. They have to fill out information and we have to fingerprint them. We've had some people who, upon being told that we had to fingerprint them, declined to move forward in the process. So everyone is going to have to go through that same process to become a volunteer.
Okay. I think we're moving in a very positive direction. The grand jury report just came out and we just approved this position. So I think with the manager that's going to be put in place, I believe a lot of these issues are going to be minimal. And I do understand from reading the grand jury report, from what you said, there are only those 4 ways from what I read on how to respond on the recommendations. So I don't know that we as a council should, this is my opinion, should change any of these at this point. I think that maybe later on, once the manager's in place and some of the other people are in place and more volunteers, then at that time, can you come back and update? Can you update this grand jury report like in 3 months, 6 months?
Actually, thank you for saying that, because you just reminded me of something that I failed to mention earlier, is that when a grand jury report is issued, the city has 90 days to respond. So that is why, and this was brought forth in June, so we only have till the end of September to provide a response. And so if we were to wait, say 6 months before we responded, some of these answers most likely would be different. But because we have to respond to this report within this allotted time that is required by law, that's why many of these are kind of vague and say that it's going to require further analysis and things that we're currently working on, but not in a position to give a firm answer one way or the other.
Okay, so I believe that you, as the chief, from what I understand and see, that you do want the community input, and you've allowed your door to be open from what I see. So if there's any questions regarding this at this point, are you willing to meet? I mean, you already met with those 2 groups. Is there any follow-through from that, from those groups, those meetings, those 2 meetings that you had?
Are you talking about the rescue meetings? The rescue, the rescue summit?
Yes.
So the rescue summit right now, the follow-up is going to be a final document that we discussed, that we talked about with the rescue groups on both of those nights. And that rescue agreement is kind of like guidelines and rules and procedures that the rescue groups can expect from the shelter and that the shelter will expect from the rescue groups. And so it's kind of like a contractual agreement in which we both agree that, you know, these are the things that we both agree during this relationship to do for one another. And then that's going to be a final piece of that, which should be coming out relatively shortly.
So I think that we're doing as best as we can at this point. Like I said, I believe there's a very positive direction that we're going, and I don't believe that there's a closed door. And if the community has some questions for you, I'm sure that they just have to reach out to you and you'll fill them in, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Tiscarino?
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Orchuk. I think we are moving in a positive forward direction with the limitations you're given to answer these questions. I think it's pretty much said, and you did answer a lot of questions that I was going to ask, and so thank you for that. But you know, when you have to write down further analysis, that tells me as a city that we're going to continue to have discussion on this and try to progress on this and try to work with everyone to make these specific issues a valid issue that all of us can live with, right? So,
yeah, and I'll just say, I'll remind everyone, this is the 4th audit/evaluation of the animal shelter since 2009, between Citygate, between the UC Davis report, and the prior grand jury report. All of these things have identified issues that for many years we have heard people speak about this, that the issues that were identified haven't been addressed. Well, I can assure you they're being addressed right now. And, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. These things do take time. We are working on them and we are moving forward. And I feel very good about our partnership with ARF and the direction that they are providing for us and the recommendations that they're making. And ultimately, it's my/the city's decision. You know, ARF is providing recommendations, but ultimately the decision to move forward with any of these falls upon me. And so I have that final say, but I like the direction that we're going. I think the animal shelter manager is going to be a huge resource, just like I talked about at the last council meeting. You know, I have 2 part-time police managers in there trying to perform a function that I truly believe needs to be performed by a full-time shelter manager with expertise and experience in shelter operations and management. And so with that piece put into play within our shelter, I do believe that's where we're going to see even more progress being made.
Okay, thank you, Chief. With that said, Mayor Pro Tem, I'd like to entertain a motion. I recommend, it is recommended that the City Council adopt a resolution approving and authorizing the mayor to sign the attached response to the grand jury report, Animal Shelter Services in Antioch and Contra Costa County.
There has been a motion. There has been a motion by Councilmember Tiscarino and a second by Councilwoman Overchuk. Is there any discussion? I'll only add I still have concerns about number 12, but I don't see any consensus on that, so I will let that go and cast your votes, please. Four affirmative votes. So the motion passes. Council regular agenda.
Holly, I will agree with you that if you would have asked me 22 years ago in the police academy if I would have known this much about animal sheltering, I would have told you you're crazy.
Council regular agenda, item 3, master license agreement for wireless facilities on poles in the city right-of-way, Mobility LLC. I'll turn it over to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Thorpe.
All those things.
Thorpe and Mayor, members of the City Council. This item was actually prepared by Alan Wolkin, contract staff for the city, with in coordination with telecom law firm and Trip May, who's in the audience tonight and is going to assist me with any difficult questions you might have about this item if they come up. But basically what this is the city's been working for quite a while now with Mobility, who are looking to put smaller microcell wireless facilities on city streetlights. And so there's currently some legislation, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, Senate Bill 649, which is attempting to limit the city's discretionary review and ability to put certain regulations on these types of cellular facilities. And so what this agreement does with Mobility is it dictates the design of the poles and what they look like as far as the base where the equipment is being stored and the antenna at the top of the pole, which there's a picture in the staff report, as well as sets an amount that Mobility is to pay the city on an annual basis per pole, which is begins at $2,000 per year and increases by 3% annually. This is a 10-year contract that we would be entering into with Mobility, and there's a one-time fee of $8,000, which funds the staff time that was involved with this process. Regarding Senate Bill 649, it's expected to be acted on early next month, when the legislature reconvenes in Sacramento. But basically what it's going to do is it's going to cap how much cities can lease out pole space for. It's going to eliminate some of cities' abilities to negotiate public benefit, and also limit the time frame as far as the review and approval of these types of facilities. And so by virtue of the city entering into this agreement here tonight, it establishes a methodology or an expectation of future cellular companies that come in, or folks like Mobility that come into the city and want to install similar technology on city streetlights. And so we believe that this is a good thing for us to be entering into before the state legislature acts on Senate Bill 649. We also believe that with the financial benefit to the city at $2,000 per pole per year, with the number of poles that we expect Mobility to be installing these types of services on, is also going to be good for the city financially. And I think most importantly is just that the city establishes ourselves for future companies like Mobility that might want to come into town with a protocol that they would be able to follow. And so then we can expect similar installations throughout the city so that we don't get different looks and just what comes with that. So like I said, I'm not an expert in this area. I leave that up to Trip May and possibly the folks at Mobility, but I'd be glad to answer any questions regarding this item, and I just recommend that council approve this agreement.
Any questions from council? Councilwoman Overchuck?
I don't have any questions. I just have an agreement with the city manager. I think we need to jump on this as quickly as possible so that we get ours in place and not wait for the state to tell us what we can and can't do. Some of the poles that I've seen the pictures of when you Google them, they're quite massive and quite ugly in some of these areas. So that's just my thought.
Councilwoman Wilson?
Yes, yeah, I'm in agreement with this. I know in League of California Cities, they've been talking about this bill coming and really having cities protect themselves. I also asked that we look at the city of Sacramento, who've already have started this progress, but I think they also, on top of the funding they're getting per pole, they have set up where certain wireless companies are putting money into kind of a fund account that cities use for either Parks and Rec or youth programs. So I think we need to definitely also take a look at what Sacramento's doing and basically steal that idea. And that's just kind of a question or a recommendation I put out to staff to do.
Council Member Tiscarino?
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well. I just want, and I know the answer, I just want to clarify so those who are in attendance and those who are watching understand what we're trying to get accomplished here. So if we go ahead and approve this and SB 649 does pass and is implemented, it cannot tell or delegate or let, for the most part, tell the city of Antioch, our business in that respect. I'm trying to word this correctly at this point, but my understanding is we have an ordinance in place. State legislature can't outrule us.
So it's my understanding in talking with Mr. May, and he may jump up and correct me earlier today, is that this will establish a design that we can use going forward with these companies. We still would be subject to the terms of SB 649 as it may relate to the maximum amount of money that we could collect, but this would establish a protocol or a way for us going forward that would allow us to know what we're going to be getting as far as the look of the pole is concerned and the antenna on it.
That's fairly accurate, right? So the intent of this agreement, by the way, my name is Trip May. I'm with Telecom Law Firm. I'm your outside consultant. The purpose of this agreement is to set our own rules of the road with respect to our relationship with Mobility. And we can have that same relationship with anybody else who wants to come in and have a license like that. The way the bill works is that there's a cutoff point. After the effective date, the new rules will take effect. They'll be applicable on a going forward basis to people who don't have this kind of an agreement with us. And that's how we're preserving the city's authority with respect to one of the larger providers.
So for clarity purposes, if another company wants to entertain the city of Antioch, they cannot use the new legislative law as far as the aesthetics of the pole, the size and diameters and things like that.
So the city can't force any of the carriers to use the master license agreement. They could wait it out. But competition being the way it is, it's good to be a first mover, and especially when the carriers are fighting over their subscribers so quickly, so fiercely. If we have the agreement in place with that particular licensee, that carrier, the city's authority is preserved to the extent that it is agreed to in the license. If you don't have that agreement in place, then it's possible that those new regulations would control that relationship after the effective date with licensee or carriers that are not licensees.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The city manager is correct that we are establishing a process that allows these carriers to come in and we're doing so with a design guideline that would be preserved through the end. It would really be only the money that would change. But the way the bill is written, the design that the staff has come up with and approved as sort of a pre-approved design would be still enforceable after the effective date of the law.
Thank you. And my apologies, I wasn't able to form the questions the way I wanted it to, but you did answer my questions.
Okay.
With that said, if there's no other comments, I don't mind entertaining a motion.
No, yeah, I agree with everybody. We need to move as quickly as we can. So with that, I hear a motion from Councilmember Tiscarino. Is there a second? I'll second. A second by Councilwoman Wilson. Is there any discussion? Councilwoman Ogercher.
I do have discussion. So on what was said regarding Sacramento, is that something that we can look into, or are we in a contract with somebody already, or?
That's through 5 bars, so we wouldn't be able to.
Wait a second.
I believe Mr. May has a little more information than I do about how Sacramento's arrangement works.
So Sacramento does have an existing relationship with a third-party manager called 5 Bars. But the city is able to get similar types of benefits, whether they go with a third-party manager or do it themselves. The benefits of doing it yourself is that, one, you can't be preempted in your relationship to the carrier, right? The state has considered new amendments to the bill that's already been piled on that would not grandfather existing agreements that have a go-between, but only grandfather existing agreements that are direct. One thing that you could do, Councilmember Wilson, is authorize the city manager to have authority to negotiate for in-kind consideration in lieu of or in addition to pecuniary consideration, which might be something that would be useful after the effective date of the bill, because the pecuniary consideration will be so small that the benefits of in-kind compensation will be better.
Can we include that? I'm sorry. Can we include that in, do we need to include that in the motion?
That's what I was going to ask. Can we amend it?
I'm
So-
seeing Derek just kind of look at me, so.
I'm not sure that it would relate to this specific.
That would have to be something
It would be
completely
for
different.
future agreements, I believe.
Do we have a time limit on that as well? Like, would that need to come back to us pretty quickly?
So the agreement that you have in front of you could be transformed into a template that's used off the shelf for any other carrier. And if you coupled it with a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into it, they wouldn't have to come back to the city council, so long as the terms were substantially the same as what you have approved as your template. You could modify that by allowing the city manager a little bit more leeway when it comes to in-kind consideration. But we would defer to the city attorney as to what the scope of the city manager's authority should be in that delegation.
I'm looking to the city attorney.
No, I mean, I think tonight's agenda item is an approval of a master license agreement.
So this other item needs to would come
It
back.
needs to come back, but I think the city manager obviously understands that he needs to formulate things and bring it back to you. And there is time, even if the statute is passed. It does not take, it's not an urgency statute, so it does not take effect till January 1. So I do want to make clear that the only thing on the agenda that's noticed tonight is the actual approval of this agreement.
We have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes. Motion passes with 4 affirmative votes. Item number 4, authorization to amend code enforcement consulting contract with TRB and Associates to extend the expiration date of the contract to June 30th, 2018, and increase the not to exceed amount by $250,000. I'm assuming that's supposed to be increase in amount not to exceed 250. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Thorpe and members of City Council. This item will be presented by Community Development Director Ebbs related to this contract with TRB and Associates.
Yes, good evening. This item actually dates back to our budget, and this came up at that time. We specifically requested money to allow us to engage a proactive code enforcement unit through the use of contract services. As the report states, our code enforcement division currently operates on a complaint-driven basis. We have 3 code enforcement officers, we have a code enforcement manager, a 2-person abatement team, and 1 administrative person who supports them. Nearly entirely all of their work is complaint-driven, and a large percentage of that is in response to homeless encampments. This leaves very little time for them to proactively initiate enforcement efforts. What we mean by that is those are the things that we all drive by day after day, and it gets under our skin because you look at it, and many of you file those complaints, but the officers, if they stopped every time they saw something, they would never get to their destination or be able to respond to our citizens' complaints. What we're doing through this effort is engaging 2 individuals who will serve strictly in that proactive capacity. They would develop a strategic plan of attack and find those corridors and those areas that need the attention, and working with the city manager, myself, we'll come up with a strategy to best use their resources. That's our plan here. They would then address those high visibility, high impact issues, and hopefully make a lot of change. We see this as a matter of deferred maintenance, really. And so even though we're working off a 1-year plan here, and in a year we'll come back and see where we stand, we believe that even within a year, we'll be able to address a lot of that deferred maintenance and hopefully reset things in many areas and make a big change. So with that, I'll conclude my report and take any questions you may have.
I have a couple questions. What would the cost of 2 employees be instead of contractors?
Do you recall those figures? About $140,000 per cost? About $120,000, so 120, I think, Don. Around $128,000 per employee.
So just basically less than the cost of...
About the same, yeah. This is $250 for a year.
I mean, I appreciate the fact that I want to keep moving forward with this issue of addressing the homeless. But I see this as we should be hiring employees versus independent contractors to do this. And it does take a while to hire employees for this position, and then they'd have to be trained. So I don't know if I can do this, but I would ask that we look at hiring 2 employees, authorizing, if council so wishes, authorizing the independent contractors, and then looking, maybe agendizing the addition of the 2 employees.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives you probably a full 6 months with the independent contractors, and then they have to train the 2 employees. So by the time the year's up, then we will have the employees on board, up and running, versus the independent contractors.
So if I can, so we're either being asked to approve or deny this contract, correct?
Correct.
So we can't consider that item tonight, correct?
The only item for consideration tonight is the approval of this contract. Certainly, if the council thinks there are other alternatives to the proposed action, it can discuss those for purposes of deciding whether to go with what's proposed tonight or not. But if you do want to move forward with something different, you really need to stop at the point where you decide you want to go in a different direction, give staff direction, and then it can come back at a future meeting.
Councilmember Tiscarino?
No, I agree. I think in the long term, it's desirable for us to have permanent employees doing the job. Don't know if we're capable of doing that now. That's one of the reasons why I think you're entertaining an extension of a contract. But I would want to see if we're potentially looking at permanent employment, budget line item on what's going to cost now within the next several years. We know what this is going to cost us for the next couple of years, or at least for the year. So as much as I want to see, full-time employees here, and I support that, I don't know if we can sustain them at this particular point, so I would love to see a budget study on that before I make a conscious decision. So at that point in time, that's maybe a discussion later, but I think we need to address this one right now, and possibly agendize, if we have to, further discussion on a permanent employee.
Councilwoman Wilson?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, Councilmember Orgachuk, about permanent employees, but I think at this point in time, we need to get these two on the street, because the public has heard about these two positions about going out, and they've been, I know I've been getting questions, where are they? So I think at this point in time, we need to go forward with this, and maybe come budget time next year, revisit if we want to make these full times. But at this point in time, I'm ready to approve this and get these two employees out there and cleaning up, the designated blighted areas that they're going to be working on.
Councilwoman Orgachuk?
I think that's exactly what I just said, that we need these two to start and then come back with another agenda item, because the cost, from what I understand, for two regular employees is $232,956. So I'm looking at $250,000 for an employee or two employees on an independent contract. So I agree, we need to get this going. That's exactly what I said. We need to keep this going. You need to keep going in a good momentum. But I would ask that this come back on a future agenda item to look at the cost of two employees, because even if we wait for a year, as just mentioned, it's going to take another full year to get them hired, to get them up and running. So that's just my thought.
Sure.
So I can make a motion if you want. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to add, if I remember correctly, the reason, and I know you and I talked about this a lot when I first got elected, and Ron, that we wanted to tie this as contract positions because we were interested in just tying it to the idea that they would be temporary positions tied to Measure C. And so that we knew that Measure C was going to expire at some time, we wouldn't be obviously promising anyone any type of job security, or for that matter, working with our union partners so that they understand that these were not intended to be full-time positions, because we didn't know the certainty of what would happen with an extension to Measure C or with staffing levels. So I agree, we need to get these folks on the streets and having some proactive code enforcement detail. I am a little concerned as I was reading the staff report. So this would fund Mike's position as well as an additional code enforcement officer, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I am somewhat disappointed in that we didn't budget for Mike's position to begin with. I was looking forward to hiring additional staff beyond one to get on the street. So I was a little concerned about that, but we can't do anything about that now. So this is where we're at.
Okay, and just for clarity, the one contract code enforcement staff we have right now is operating kind of on a interim budget, so they're not budgeted long term. So Mike's position, as you refer to it, is not budgeted for the remainder of the fiscal year, absent this contract.
Okay. So yeah. All right. So that being said, is there any other additional discussion? Oh, public comment. I'm sorry. That being said, I'll open it up to public comment. Tim McCall.
Thank you for letting me speak. Thank you for your comments. I did also want to remind that they were temporary funds based on Measure C. I would also like you to consider that since the cost of the employee full-time is the same as a contractor, if the full-time employee gets hurt, the cost is going to increase to the city over that because of disability or workman's comp and items like that. So I'd like for you to keep that in mind too as you go on and continue the discussion about full-time versus contractors, and whether this full-time is literally full-time or if it's temporary based on Measure C funds. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions, comments? Councilman Tiscarino.
I agree that, you know, at this point in time, again, like you said, our desire, again, is to hopefully hire full-time, but we do understand the cost. So it's not just, as the speaker just mentioned, it's not just, you know, workers' compensation costs and things like that, but you have to take into account, you know, the pensions and benefits and things like that. So that is quite a bit of money. I understand that. So we can wish and hope, and hopefully in the future we're able to do so, but we have to be realistic. And that's one of the reasons why I do support this measure here. So with that said, if there's nobody other questions, I'll go ahead and read the motion. It is recommended that the City Council authorize the City Manager to amend the Code Enforcement Consultant Contract with TRB and Associates to extend the expiration date of the contract to June 30th, 2018, and increase not to exceed the amount by $250,000. This will bring the total contract amount beginning July 1st, 2016, and ending June 30, 2018, to $450,000.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Councilwoman Ogorchuk, cast your votes, please. Motion passes with 4 affirmative votes.
Thank you.
Item 5, resolution approving a new class specification of registered veterinary technician, assisting a salary range and assisting the classification of the operating engineer local union number 3 bargaining unit, assigning, my apologies, the classification to the operating engineers local 3 bargaining unit. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Thorpe and council members. This item will be presented by Administrative Services Director Mastay.
Good evening. What you have before you is a resolution to approve the class specification for the registered veterinary technician and assigning that classification to a salary range and to the operating engineers local union number 3 bargaining unit. This item was actually the position and the funding was approved by council in February 14th, 2017. The estimated total annual salary range with benefits ranges from $65,029 to $79,036. Also, with Maddie's funds, we'll be funding this position for 9 months. Some of the duties include they'll perform physical examinations and administer emergency treatment to the animals, order and maintain inventories of all types, administer anesthesia to the animals. Any questions?
Questions from council? None? And just so I'm clear,
Yes.
we've funded this position and it was budgeted for, unlike our animal services manager.
That's correct.
Okay, I just made it clear. All right, if there is no further discussion, I'll open it up to public comment. Dr. Jeffrey. Let's move faster. Let's move. No, just kidding.
At the risk of wearing out my welcome this evening, I just want to encourage you to vote for this. It sends a clear signal that we're serious about it. Those of us who take quality of life issues and particularly focus on the animal shelter and animals, you know, we're very pleased with what we're seeing. Don't mistake and scrutinize the details as objecting to where we're going. We think the chief's taking it the right direction. We think the collaboration with Arthur is fantastic. And voting for this is another check mark that we're making progress on that, so I encourage you to do that. Thank you.
And a fully funded check mark, the way I like it. Councilwoman Ogorchuk.
If there's no further questions, I will make the motion that the City Council adopt a resolution, 1, approving the class specifications of registered veterinary technician, and 2, assigning the registered veterinary technician classification to a salary range and assigning the classification to the operating engineers local union number 3 bargaining unit.
There is a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Tiscarino. Cast your votes, please. Motion passes with 4 affirmative votes. Public comment? Karen Copps.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to clarify something about the Rivertown Cat Agreement. After 2 years of discussion, a contract was signed by Susan Smith, our colony manager, Monica Helgamo, and me. HARP agreed to certain schedules and stipulations that we were to take care of. HARP volunteers have feed, given water, and cleaned daily, or possibly almost daily. Dumped friendly cats have been fixed. They've been adopted. Feral cats have been fixed and released. Injured cats have been given medical care at our expense. I have one community cat from the Rivertown area because there were injuries that were made to some of the cats in Rivertown, including one with a crossbow. So Buddha has been in my neighborhood. I feed him. He greets visitors who come to pick up supplies, HARP supplies. He's very friendly. I have not received any complaints in the last 2 years by people who violated the agreement. In the contract, it states that HARP will receive notices if there's any violation. I have received none. So all food, supplies, medical care have been paid by HARP with no financial assistance from the city. And I thank you all. Some of you were here at the time the agreement was proposed in November of 2015, and others weren't, but I thank the council for coming to this agreement, and I think it does show that with community involvement, we can come to an agreement. We always talk about crazy cat ladies, and we are definitely crazy cat ladies. We had a lot of discussion between the groups, but we did finally come to an agreement, and all of that could have been avoided, in my opinion, by having an advisory board that could have given input before it came to the council. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Staff communications.
Just one communication. This week on August, or actually it was last week on August 17th, the city filed suit against the California Department of Water Resources, challenging the final impact, the final environmental impact report for the water fix project, stating that it violates the requirements of CEQA. We basically identified that the report identifies what we believe are significant impacts to Antioch's water quality, which have not been mitigated. Basically, that it increases the salinity levels at our intake. And so just wanted to let the community know that we're actively protecting our water rights, and until we believe that the impacts have been mitigated and we've been made whole, we will continue to challenge any project that threatens that.
Thank you. Council communications and future agenda items. Councilwoman Wilson?
No future agenda items. I am a cat owner, so I guess I'm a crazy cat lady too.
We've known that for some time. Councilman Ogorchuk. Councilman, okay. Just remind the community about Food Truck Thursdays, and our preschool is accepting registration starting in September. So make sure you get your kids enrolled. And thank you, as always, Ron, for all your hard work. With that, this meeting stands adjourned.